Yeah,
You know,
no lie about that.
I know a lot of writers, they'll start with the beginning of their stories. I've always been a fan of starting with what you want the audience to leave with and then working backwards, because now you're starting with the emotional response of the audience as the predicate rather than trying to build something that makes them feel. Start with what you want them to feel and then reverse engineer it through characters.
Hook them right off the bat.
Right.
Hit them with something of substance to make them go,
Hmm.
"What was that?" And then you got their attention. You might have learned some things working on these movies and all those stories you were writing. So what was your first job in the film industry proper? Like, so you've made it to Atlanta, you've done your program, your internship, you said that was a
Yeah.
Queen thing?
That was my first production job, but it wasn't my first job in the industry. Have you ever seen Logan Lucky?
I have not.
I have a scene in Logan Lucky with Daniel Craig. So Logan
Ooh.
Lucky was Steven Soderbergh's NASCAR heist movie. Channing Tatum, Seth MacFarlane, Daniel Craig, guy that played Kylo Ren, whose name is escaping me right now. And I was
Yeah.
taking my GFA classes at Pinewood, but I was working through one of these local background agencies. I got picked to be a background prisoner in a jail. Go figure. Big black guy prisoner.
Play to your strengths. Play the stereotypes. Hey,
But it was cool. They lined second AD lined us up, and she like walked us into the cafeteria. A few seconds later, she came back. She grabbed me by my shoulder. She said, "You come with me." She stood me in front of the camera, and I was like, "Oh snap! I'm about to make the scene. I'm going to be in the shot." And then I'm feeling good, and the guy standing behind the camera, he's like, "Hey, can you move over this way?" I'm like, "Okay, okay." And then I turn and look, and Daniel Craig, probably about 50 pounds heavier than we've ever seen him in anything. And I think he did it on purpose. I'm not talking bad about Daniel Craig,
yeah.
but he was eating limp bacon, which I thought was crazy. It was limp, cold bacon, but I guess he was getting ready for character. And I recognized him. I was like, I didn't say anything because I didn't want to blow my chance. But there was Daniel Craig, and then the camera guy goes, "I need you to step to the." And so I did, and I looked, and it's Steven Soderbergh lining up his shot. That was my first job in the film industry, and I remember leaving there, coming home that day, thinking to myself, "That's a sign for you. That's a sign for you." So that was actually my first job in the film industry, which was actually as a background on camera. Then when I finished my program at GFA, my internship was on Finding Steve McQueen. But I felt at that moment, okay, I made a couple of right decisions here, because if I was still in Orlando floating around my pool hawking real estate, that would have never happened.
Dude, that's cool because that's a name director, does good stuff. You rattled off a bunch of name actors, including Adam Driver, and I'm a big
Adam
fan of that
Driver,
guy.
yes.
I haven't seen him give a bad performance. I've seen a bad movie that he happened to be in, but he wasn't doing bad. That was just the
Right.
movie itself. But that's cool, dude. That's
If you get a
cool.
chance, go check it out. You can see me. I'm on camera for like 35 seconds.
Yeah, no, I'm writing stuff down so I can go back and check on these things. That Logan Lucky, that is so cool, dude. I'm happy for you. So from there, camera assistant, production assistant, location manager, director, writer, all that stuff. So far, is there one of those that you've done more of than the others? Because I'm curious about how that's been for all of them, but what's the biggest one you've done?
Definitely worked more in the production department as a PA, as a non-union AD, even as a COVID compliance officer in the production department for Ozarks, the final season, which I got to learn a lot from, because the producers were very generous because they knew it was the last season. So they gave a lot of leeway for people to be in departments they shouldn't necessarily be in to get a holistic experience. And I love that about that show. But I would say definitely in the production department, which kind of prepared me for understanding the mechanisms of how shows get scheduled, run, produced. And then I bounced around as many different departments as I could along the way. One, just to get on set and get work. But two, I never graduated from my film courses in university, but they don't prepare you for the practical production experience anyway. It's theory, it's art, you just get all that stuff. So that was my film school. The first few years of my life in the film industry, worked locations, camera assistant. I just wanted to learn as much as I could to see how departments actually worked, knowing one day I wanted to own a production house where we did our own stuff, and knowing that I would struggle to try to put together the parts and pieces to make it happen. I wanted to see how it really worked on set. But definitely worked in the production department, probably more than anything else. I really like it. It's more suitable to my strengths: organization, communication, planning. Like I said, my mom was in the military, so I come from kind of a military mindset in that way. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And that's something more suitable for the production department than props. You know what I mean? Props, a lot of those guys have art backgrounds, and because you got to understand period, textiles, costumes, fabrics, it's a lot of stuff in the art department that you have to have real grasp of. And I found from my previous professional experience, my talents were best suited for production, which was kind of cool.
And I think this is a very valuable experience for you to build up from, because you're doing the hands-on like technical work now, but as you do more and more directing work, I'm sure you're still going to have your hands dirty in doing the production stuff, but you know how it all works. You know
Yes.
what it can do. That's incredibly important for anybody that's in charge of anything, to know how each of the elements work, what they can do, what they can't do. And so that's good,
It
man.
goes to everything. It's like people know we shoot coverage, but do you know that every time the coverage changes, the world has to shrink from wide to medium to tight? That's 25 minutes to move the camera. So if you're planning a production day, every time you change a piece of coverage, you have to allot that amount of time. And that's all stuff you learn in the practical environment rather than in a school. So I call it my guerrilla warfare education. I'm one of those people, like, I don't just want you to tell me, I want to see for myself. And that was kind of my approach, is like, I want to see. I don't just want to know what this one department, because quite frankly, in the union shows, an electrician can't pick up a microphone. A set painter can't move a light. So the departments are very segregated in that way. So unless you work in a couple of different ones, you really don't get to learn the lingo, the equipment, the kind of modus operandi of every department. You just kind of see it on the surface level, but I wanted to know more because I imagined buying my own equipment. And what should I buy? What's the difference between a Cardellini and a Mayfair? What's the difference between an HMI light and LEDs? So I wanted to know that stuff. So that's why I went about it in that way. And knowing that I didn't finish my film courses, I was really desperate to find something that would make me valuable. And I thought, at least knowing the basics of what the department does, somebody would bring me on as somebody green and train me up. In a lot of cases, that's what I found. Because these guys that's what they do. They are specialists. And a lot of times they look down upon people that bounce from department to department because you're not a tradesperson in that particular thing. But if you go in and ask a lot of dumb questions and show people you're willing to work, you'd be surprised how much they're willing to impart on you.
And in the modern job market situation, it seems like that college credential is getting less and less valuable because you don't necessarily know anything. You don't necessarily know how to do anything. Whereas the skilled trades, which is very much all over a film production, those are skills. A lot of those are highly technical jobs. Having experience, having a track record, having something to show for what you've been doing, I think that's probably more valuable. So I think that'll work out for you.
I've been enjoying it.
Good. Now, you already mentioned Ozark. When I was looking at the so far published CV you've got, one of the things that jumped out at me, like, oh, I know that one because I know at least a dozen people that have seen every episode of Ozark. And you worked on quite a few of those, as you
The
said, in the last
entire
season.
fourth season, yeah. And that was a double season. We shot for a full year during COVID. So we shot from October 2020 to October 2021.
That's a long
And
time.
it's a full year. It blew my mind. And that's one of the reasons I took the job, is because I don't have to look for work for a year. And in the film industry, that's like, butter on both sides of your bread. So I jumped in. I didn't care what the job was, but it actually turned out to be really cool.
Most film shoots, they're weeks long, right?
Yeah.
Maybe up to 6 months if it's a really brutal one. Is that
Mhm.
about
No,
fair?
that's about right. Like, you can shoot a feature in 20 days. Most features run about, I would say, 45 to maybe 70 days. And if you got a stunt spectacular or an action spectacular, it can run a lot longer, because car chases and action scenes, they take multiple days to shoot. You don't get all your coverage for some of these big shootouts and car scenes in a day. So they can run a little bit longer. The average television show runs anywhere 4 to 6 months, but that's maybe 10, 12 episodes. That season we did of Ozark was a double season. I think it was a total of 16 episodes that they put out, but it was a full year of shooting for us. And COVID shutdowns for like sometimes weeks at a time.
But that's got to be a good experience because you get a lot of time on target. You don't have to keep relearning how different people do things because you're working with mostly the same people for that entire season.
Yeah, and what you do in that time is that amount of time gives you a chance to really know other. And I was a COVID compliance officer, so part of what we did was testing. Now, my job was specifically base camp, so the talent, the producers, and people like that. Other people did the general crew and like transportation or whatever. But over the course of that long, you get to know and meet other people in different departments. I had to know them all by face and name. I would check them in a couple different times a day. And that gives you the ability to go ask questions. That gives you an ability when you got a few, let's go hang out with the grips and see what's going on over there and see what we can soak up through osmosis or dumb questions. So yeah, I've made a lot of connects on that show. A lot of the people who helped fund the Dumpy Man's Walk short were actually people that I worked with on Ozark because I was actually writing the short form of the script at that time and letting a few confidential trusted people read it when it came time to start raising funds for it because we self-financed it. $2,500 here, $3,000 there. Hey, you want to take a meeting with this guy? You know, blah, blah, blah. It jump started the Dumpy Man.
That's awesome, dude. While it was an unfortunate time, if you were vigilant and eager, there are things that you could get ahead on during the COVID era. And in this case, it sounds like it was worked out in its own fashion for you. So did you spend a lot of time up the star's nostrils with those little swabs?
What my job was is to coordinate. We had our own nursing staff. We built our own rapid test labs. Ozark's COVID budget was ridiculous. But so we had epidemiologists on the team, and then we had a team of about 7 nurses. Our crew was massive. The crew was like 317 people. We had scheduled test days. Our jobs were basically to make sure they had PPE and sanitation materials, make sure that they were getting tested as part of the regimen. And for talent, that was 3 days a week. But anybody, like, say, we actually had John Boy from the Waltons come on set one day and be co-star in that season, and we would take him to rapid testing. So even though he wasn't in the normal testing protocol, we could come get him rapid tested, and then within an hour, we knew whether or not we could take him to set. So my job was kind of to be the first face they saw in the morning, to make sure they had their PPE, to make sure that they were being tested, to make sure anybody that came within certain zones of them were tested. It was a lot of fun. I got to get way closer to the talent than I had ever imagined. Basically, my job was making sure that talent and the above the line producers had everything that they needed on a regular basis for COVID compliance.
Okay. So besides that important job on set, are there some significant memories or stories you want to share with us about, say, what you were doing or some anecdote that happened while you were working on That Much Ozark?
Well, I do remember, forgot what month it was, but it was in the winter, and we were doing a scene where Navarro's private plane lands on like a private airstrip, and Marty has to go out and have this conference with him in his plane because he can't stay in America because he's like a fugitive or whatever, right? So we go out there to, I think it was in Dallas, Georgia. We go out to the airport, we shoot the scene, it starts flurrying, right? Snow flurries. And I said to myself, wow, this is kind of cool. So I see one of the producers, Dana Scott, she's walking back to base camp for whatever reason. And I said to her, this is going to look great on camera. And she was like, Greg, it's supposed to be August. And I thought that was the funniest thing ever because we had just spent the full day out there. And I'm looking around in awe, like all of us are on set, like, ooh, ooh. And I was like, this is going to be beautiful on camera. And she was like, Greg, it's supposed to be August. And I was like, oh. She's like, yeah, we'll be back for this. And sure enough,
Well,
we went back and had to go over and shoot it again.
do you think the audience is keeping track of time? It's still a cool shot.
That was so funny to me.
Oh, that's tough.
Those are a lot of good times on that show. Like I always enjoyed. So Julia Garner has a dog named Mr. Business. He's actually got like 2 million Facebook followers or whatever, and he's just this big white English bulldog. But I used to love walking Mr. Business and seeing him walk around because he was just so cool. And I thought this dog has more social media presence than I do, and that always blew my mind. But that show was a lot of fun. Really good people. It was a lot like they had been together for seasons. And one of the things, and maybe it's just my lack of experience, but one of the things I loved about Ozark was they brought people back season after season. So they were like a family, and they kind of adopted me for that one season. But you could see the genuine affection for people amongst cast and crew and all around on the set. And it was unlike anything I'd ever seen before on a set that I had worked on.
One of the things I want to say is that, yes, Mr. Business no doubt has more followers than both you and I put together. But Mr. Business doesn't have a job, and someone else is managing those accounts for him. Whereas every post on Instagram, you got to do, I got to do, every day we got to earn a check. He just has to be Mr. Business, and he's got handlers. If we had handlers, we might have that kind of following. So don't beat yourself up that Mr. Business got more than you.
Mr. Business is about his business.
He about that business. That's right. So how did you get to work on Ozark?
So dumb luck.
That
I
works.
saw there's this website in Georgia where it's like the Georgia Production Hotline, and they list like, oh, this show's looking for this show's looking for that. So I applied for the Ozarks job as a PA. I did not get it. And then the Georgia Film Academy sent out a thing specifically looking for COVID compliance officers. And when I heard about the COVID positions, I went and took the training on like Coursera or something and got my certificates. And they called me I was like, oh, is this for the PA job? And she was like, no, this is for the COVID. And then she explained the job to me, and I was like, all right, cool. I mean, I'm fat, I'm black, and I'm bald, so I'm like high risk for COVID. You know what I mean? So I was a little leery at first, but when she was like, it's a year of work and this is the raid and this is the show, and I was a fan of Ozark, so I was like, yo, I'm down. And it was just dumb luck.
That's awesome. But you saw an opportunity appear that this COVID compliance officer thing was. You beat cheeks to get that certification, and then that's what got you there because you were willing to do whatever so long as you got to work on these productions. That's smart. That's hustle. I love it.
And it goes back to just trying to get on set. I gave up a career in real estate and restaurants to come to Atlanta and try to make this thing happen. Working in film industry isn't a full-time job. It is a gig-to-gig search. So I'm always trying to, like I was saying about the guerrilla warfare thing, just trying to learn as much as I could to make myself valuable, to take advantage of these types of opportunities. And I think the Georgia Film Academy sent out a link saying, hey, take this free COVID compliance course. And I did, and it worked out. It was just dumb luck.
Fortune favors the prepared.
Yes.
And you were prepared.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That was very cool.
And in no particular order, a couple of the other big titles that jumped out at me. Werewolf by Night. I've seen it, and I am disenchanted with the Disney Marvel movies at this point, as a lot of people are. But that one, I liked that one. I thought this is something different. There's a little more English on this ball. There's a little more style in this. I enjoyed that one. So I was glad to see that you worked on the one that I liked. So tell us about how you got involved and what you do.
So I was a day playing props assistant for about 2 weeks. Basically, my job was to be the runner between the Marvel's props warehouses here are massive. So think about every Marvel show you've ever seen almost. When they break down those sets, a lot of times they don't just toss them. They put them in warehouses in case they have to bring them back for whatever reason. So my job on Werewolf by Night was assisting the on-set and assisting the props assistant. So a lot of times I would just get in my car and drive back and forth to the warehouse. Like you said, I really liked Werewolf by Night too because it was a departure from that superhero stuff. And that departure, it kind of opened the Marvel world a little bit for me. I was hoping they were going to use that as a jumping off point for some of those guys that they introduced, and maybe they will eventually. But I didn't know what the show was when I took the job because Marvel, a lot of times you might not get a call sheet. And when you're a day player, a lot of times they just call you and tell you to be here. They don't tell you what's going on because of secrecy or whatever. But yeah, no, I actually saw it and I was pleasantly surprised, a lot like you. But the big blue guy that had the chains that the werewolf was protecting at the very end, I used to have to drive his head and chains back and forth. That's basically what I did for a few weeks. A friend got me on. That was the benefit of the networking because he said, hey, we need an assistant. And I was like, I'll be there.
Good. And one thing that stuck out about me about that movie was it was only about 50 or 55 minutes. It didn't try to pad to get to the full, say, hour and a half. It didn't try to pad to get to the 2 or 2.5 hour runtime that a lot of movies do these days. And I appreciated that. They told the story they needed to tell, and then they got out.
Yeah.
Because way too many movies these days take way too long to tell too little story. So
And it was very stylish. I liked the stylized look of it. They kind of started in black and white and then kind of moved you into the story. I really liked it. It's not my favorite Marvel film because I'm a big fan of Guardians of the Galaxy. I did enjoy it. I really enjoyed it. I was proud to be a part of it, even that little small part.
well, that's cool. Part of the cool cachet that it gets from me. All right, now it's assigned to Greg Fox.
That's
He's a little bit, maybe like 1% of the total 100% of cool. It's
right.
belongs to you.
I
Now,
appreciate
Jungle
that.
Cruise got some big names on that thing. What'd you do with that?
On Jungle Cruise, I was a second unit production assistant. An interesting story about Jungle Cruise, the gig was supposed to run about 2 months as a second unit PA, but about 4 days into the job, my wife had our daughter. And they cut me loose because I had a newborn. Not like you're fired, but like, hey, family comes first. Go be with
That's
your
good.
daughter. But then later they called me back. Actually, one of the guys that was my AD for the second unit, he was actually one of the ADs on Ozark. So we got to work again later.
Good.
Yeah, that was fun.
So, what is it you did on it? What does that particular
So
job do?
a production assistant is basically a point of communication for the other departments. We assist in the logistics of keeping the show moving. A first AD's job basically is to run the show so the director can focus on the talent, the camera, and the creative elements. First AD's job is to keep the schedule running, put assets in places where they're supposed to be thinking ahead, be taking care of the administrative part. The second AD's job is to be his voice on set, and the PA's jobs is to be the voice of him everywhere else. So hey, do you need a battery for your walkie? Hey, this group of background extras needs to come be over here. Hey, it's time to go to lunch. Hey, lunch is over at 5. It's basically like a CQ, if that makes sense for people watching. It's basically a command center, and the AD production assistants are like the forward extension of that into all other places in the production, in the office, on the set, in the field. You know, sometimes we do things as simple as ask people not to walk right now because we're shooting, or sometimes we pass out call sheets. It's a lot of different things you do, but basically what you do is support the AD and the director.
Cool. I believe that would be a great value if when the director is ready to do this next scene, he or she just walks up to where it needs to be, says, "Are we ready? You're ready." And then he
Yes,
can do his job. Because if you're
yes,
not ready, he's going to ask why, and he's going to yell at somebody, and somebody's
right.
because somebody was too slow or something went wrong, and they don't want to hear excuses.
Right.
Uh,
And let me tell you something. If the director has to do that, that's the first AD's job. So the director never even has to think about it. The director will look at the first AD and be like, where are we going to next? Because the first AD already has it set up. And the first AD says, we got another 15 minutes here for coverage. Then we're going to move on to the next scene, the next shot, or whatever else. That's something that it took me a while to learn is the hierarchy. You know, the director runs the show, but the first AD is the project manager that keeps everybody else in place. And the PAs basically go forth with the commands, you know what I mean, to let everybody else know. Because the first AD, he's not even on walkie most of the time. That's what he has everybody else for.
And in the award shows, when Best Director gets awarded and the director goes up there and inevitably thanks the cast and the crew, they mean that. They could not have done what they just won an award for. Had all those little pieces not been taken care of, so they could move in and do their big value add there. But all those little pieces are important too.
Absolutely. Like one of the things I tried not to do, especially on set, I never say I. Never say I. And you can ask people that have worked with me, that's something that they very rarely hear from me on set, unless it's like, I need to go pee or I got to make a call. But especially in situations where you're talking about the project as a whole, with me, it's never I, because you can't do it by yourself. I tried for years to do it by myself. Can't. And good directors know that. It's never really about them.
And Den of Thieves. What'd you do on Den of Thieves?
Production assistant, basically kind of the same thing. The unit that I was on specifically for that was another second unit, and it was the scene where they're moving all the money under the reserve. So all that money pushing and dressing up like they were police and all the stuff with the truck, all that stuff. At the Georgia World Congress Center, we shot it in their parking basement.